Parts of the multitester. Multimeter is an indispensable for a technician as firearms for a soldier. The interpretation of readings gives technician clues to troubleshooting.
What is an analog multimeter? An analog or analog multimeter is one of the trusty workhorses of the electronics test industry. Analog multimeters have been in use for very many years and sometimes go by the name VOA as a result of the fact that they measure volts, ohms and amps. These multimeters are extremely flexible and enable very many faults to be found in an electronic circuit. Although analog multimeters are now less common because digital multimeters, or DMMs, are now more common, some analog test meters are still available and may be found in some laboratories or may be available for use at home, etc. The analog test meters are able to give a good account of themselves and can provide readings that are sufficiently accurate for most purposes. They do require a few different skills to the digital multimeters that are more widespread these days, but they are still very easy to use. What is an analog multimeter? Analog multimeters or test meters are test instruments based around the use of a moving coil meter. This is an analog form of display that uses the deflection of an indicator needle to indicate the level of the measurement being made. Meter reading parallax errors. One cause of errors on an analog multimeter, or any analog meter for that matter, is parallax errors. This is an important concept when using an analog multimeter. When viewing the meter, the eye should be at right angles to the plane of the meter bank markings, i.e. looking directly at the meter. In this way there is no error from viewing the needle at an angle. If you look to one side, then the meter reading that is viewed can be incorrect. Analog multimeter ranges. Analog multimeters, like digital ones, have a variety of ranges. They are described in terms of full-scale deflection or FSD. This is the maximum that the range can read. In order to get the best reading, it is necessary to have the scale reading somewhere between about a quarter and all of the FSD. In this way the optimum accuracy and significant number of figures can be read. As a result of this, meters have a variety of ranges that may appear to be reasonably close to each other. A typical meter may have the following ranges. Note that the figures indicate the FSD. Analog meter advantages and disadvantages.
One of the key points of knowing how to use an analog multimeter is understanding the relevant advantages and disadvantages. Like any item of test equipment, an analog multimeter or test meter has its limitations. Knowing what they are and how to overcome them is a key stage in understanding how to use an analog multimeter to its best. Advantages.
Analog movement. The meter needle gives a continuous movement from which it is very easy to gain a fast idea of the order of magnitude, or of trends for slowly moving changes. This is not always so easy using a digital multimeter. Low cost. Analog multimeters can be bought very cheaply these days. Availability. These pieces of test equipment are still widely available from many sources despite the fact that digital multimeters tends to be more widely used.
Preference. Some people prefer to use an analog meter. It is very easy to glance at it and gain a very good indication of the approximate value of the reading. Disadvantages. Multiple scales. Any multimeter will have a number of different scales and these can cause confusion. They were often a cause of error. Lower input resistance. Using analog technology, analog multimeters did not provide such a high input impedance as a digital one. Understanding when this may be an issue is a key element of knowing how to use an analog multimeter. Polarities of test leads. Analog multimeters do not have an autopolarity function. Therefore it is necessary to correctly connect the test leads, otherwise the meter could deflect in a negative direction and quickly hit an end stop. Less accurate than a digital multimeter. Analog multimeters are typically less accurate than digital test instruments. That said, the measurements are sufficiently accurate for most of the measurements that need to be made. Parts of the multitester. Preliminary setup before measurement. 1. Before start measuring, make sure that the pointer stays at 0 position on the left end of the scale. If not, gently adjust the zero corrector with the use of screwdriver to set it to 0. 2. Select the proper range before measuring. Do not attempt to switch the range knob while measuring. Disconnect the test leads first before switching the range knob, as it may damage your multimeter. In determining a measuring range, select a higher voltage than the value to be measured, as well as where the pointer of the meter moves to a considerable extent. However, select the maximum range and measure in case the extent of value to be measured cannot be predicted. Precautions for safety measurement. 1. Never use meter on the electric circuit that exceeds 3 kVA. 2. Pay special attention when measuring the voltage of AC 30 volts or DC 60 V or more to avoid injury. 3. Never apply an input signals exceeding the maximum rating input value. 4. Never use meter for measuring the line connected with equipment that generates induced or surge voltage since it may exceed the maximum allowable voltage. 5. Never use meter if the meter or test leads are damaged or broken. 6. Be sure to use fuse of the specified rating type. Never use substitute of the use or never make a short circuit of the fuse. Seven. Always keep your fingers behind the finger guards on the probe when making measurements. 8. Be sure to disconnect the test pins from the circuit when changing the function of the range. 9. Before starting measurement, make sure that the function and range are properly set in accordance with the measurement. 10. Never use meter with wet hands or in damp environment. 11. Never open tester case except when replacing batteries or fuses. Do not attempt any alteration of original specifications. 12. Never use test leads other than the specified test leads. 13. To ensure safety and maintain accuracy, calibrate and check the meter at least once a year. What are the parts of the multitester? Why is it important to discuss or study the parts and functions of a multitester?